So picking up here in part 2, this is Dr. Thor, everyone. I hope you're ready for the great insights that are being offered here and that people get the real story going on here. So we were talking about Puharich and his lack of business skills, which are obvious. And this, of course, bit him in the bottom at the end of his life, where he basically died penniless, being very ill. His family picked up nothing. As a matter of fact, he had problems with all of it. He had several children, several wives, and they all, for a guy that everybody claims was so wonderful and charming, I guess he was able to get the babes, but he was unable to keep them, and his family was pretty mad at him because he spent all his time researching when he should be home watching Gilligan's Island and drinking Pepsi. So the whole idea is that this is one of the problems, and apparently his children have done absolutely nothing. He was unable to take the Tesla company that made the watches, who's still in business today, or somebody owns them. I doubt it's the original people, and to make that into a business and push it. And of course, these watches are selling for $800 to $900 today. So there is definitely something going on there. So, and apparently this, the rights to Tesla is owned by some company out there. I'm not really sure. There seems to be some connections to a company in New Jersey and apparently in Florida, and I'm not sure who owns what there, but I'm not sure that's important. But they certainly make some beautiful watches for some beautiful prices. $800 to $900 for a watch is generally, I would think, something most people would not invest in, even if it's a tool. I know very few people that would spend over $100 to $200 for a watch, period. So if you're spending $300, $400, $500 for a watch, well, you're talking about quite an investment, which most people didn't do. When I was growing up, everybody had Timexes, which were basically cheap but efficient watches. Rich people had Rolexes and other things, 10, 20, 30, whatever it goes with all that crap. So the bottom line is that we need to keep those things in mind of what's going on here. So he was a terrible businessman, was unable to put that together, which you would think would have been able to make him some good money, and if he would have priced it properly. But conflict happened because of bad business, bad understanding, and he was unable to take that concept to somebody else and have them make it. And again, years and years ago, we're talking about the 70s and stuff, this kind of stuff was very difficult. In this day and age, it ain't no mo. So, just like book publishing, it ain't no mo. You just put your book up there. Amazon prints it for you at no cost whatsoever until it's sold. It's a cakewalk. And none of these older people do any of this stuff because they're kind of stupid. So the bottom line is that all this is part of the reality that goes on. And the older people they've really missed out on all the new technologies out there. I had some problems with this a few years ago. Everything from using the stupid phones that we use today to using so many other technologies, was hesitant to use it. I just talked with a woman who refuses to change her Windows 7 up to this because they don't like that. They don't want to change. Well, you know, it's kind of stupid. And of course, I understand that because these new changes are always very threatening and something new to learn, and the improvements generally aren't worth the stress to newly learn. But this is changing as well. Generally, the changeover in different browsers and other things are seamless, and there's not much problems. Used to be that when you changed over, things were much more difficult. Really isn't anymore. So as we look at all these things, we have to, so, you know, times are very different back then. But for somebody who had so many contacts, and one of her major contacts was somebody who was rolling in dough, we're talking about rolling in dough, was Greta Woodrew, who was married to a very wealthy guy and had a very successful business, making literally millions of dollars a year. So I think, or it's alleged, at a time when $1 million was like 50 million now, maybe 100 million. Greta married another very successful Jewish man. She was Jewish herself and had this extremely successful business. So, needless to say, she had lots of money. She put money into animal causes, into environmental causes, and just had lots of money, apparently, and had a very going organization there. Probably was making a lot of money from her newsletter, which was very popular and went around the world. But, everything went around the world then, because the only way you could get it was subscribe to it. And I did the same thing. I subscribed from newsletters in England and even Australia at one time. And all of that is part of the bigger picture that is out there. So apparently she was doing quite well there while doing another business which really paid for everything, which apparently was millions that her husband started, that she worked in actively. And needless to say, I'm not sure what the business was. Something tells me, and I'm not sure, that she was a headhunter. She brought people to companies, and she would be involved with big companies that would pay her a lot of money to find really good people. And that's what I think, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure it matters what it was. Point is, it was a very successful business that she and her husband worked in and made a fortune. And she's more than happy to tell you this. Now, part of what was going on here is that she eventually somehow got in contact with Puharich. So Puharich then, I don't know if he hypnotized her or what the process was or not. And during this entire process, found out that she was connected to some extraterrestrial group that spoke through her. Now, this is very suspicious in general, because it gets down to the most uncredible area of metaphysics, which is channeling. Now, channeling is a real serious problem, but it also is a very important area as well if the information can be validated and is true. So people say, well, someone's talking to me through this. And of course, you can go to the extremes of that. This is called schizophrenia, when you hear voices in your heads that are telling you to do things. This is considered quite a serious and dangerous disease, because you could be told to go cut someone's throat or certain other things. So this kind of schizophrenia is often found, and patients are just goofy or just plain dangerous. So the bottom line is through, and I didn't know this until recently when I did some research, that she was directly connected to Puharich, who was the one who started all this with her. So she went there to seek information. Maybe she was hearing voices before that, whatever it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So she went there, and Puharich was the one that was working with her. And she found out that once she was connected to it, so the gossip goes, and who can believe anything written anywhere, whether it's Sewerpedia or in somebody's book? It's their opinion of what happened. So it's their interpretations of particular results that happened in front of them or from other people they talked to. So it's important to understand that. It may have just been words to you that I just said, but extremely important ones. So it's still somebody's interpretation and really their opinion, which is based on their interpretation, fogged with a whole bunch of other things. So the bottom line is that she thought that having these sessions with Puharich would stay in the research room. And of course, Puharich did this with a whole bunch of psychics and people. And what few people don't know is SRI under Russell Targ and Putoff went on for 20 years, and they literally tested thousands and thousands of people, which I was unaware of. And this went on for 10 or 15 years, where they're bringing in psychics and people that said, and we know nothing about this research because it's owned by the alphabet government organizations. So the whole idea is that, very, very interesting. She found out that the actual contact became more intense, and that she was starting to get messages. You know, you open the door and everybody comes in, and it's difficult to shut it. So the messages from these claimed extraterrestrials, and there's no proof that there is anything there. They could have been Mickey Mouse people. They could have been demonic spirits. They could have been, who knows, some guy who was a comic in the 1890s who decided to come through Woodrew. So we have no idea. Putting on a complete practical joke. We don't know. There's no way of proving it unless there's provable facts to go with it, which there never is. So we talked about these types of things. Apparently she brought the demons home with her, at least the contact, and these things never stop. Now, she stated on the Bill Jenkins show that she had never seen the aliens. They had never physically contacted her, and she had never had an experience. She wasn't taken on a spaceship or anything else, which again is makes sense to a large degree, because those are very traumatic experiences, and people that claim all that stuff, you have no idea those kind of things, how they traumatize you to be in such a complete other reality, and how frightening it is, whether they're hostile aliens or goodies. So the whole idea is that she never had this kind of contact. And what was her credibility of all this stuff? Well, Puharich was giving her credibility because he was credible to a degree. Now, again, we have problems here because he's ran into similar cases like this. And the other one is the famous The Nine, that a particular, I believe he was some sort of Indian doctor or mystic that he brought over, that when he brought over and put them in trance, or whether it was at his house, started to talk about this, the Nine, extraterrestrials. Interesting that we'd use that number yet again, being a pretty mystical number and so forth. But this was some Indian doctor, if I'm correct. Now, again, I'm not 100% sure, and I'm not going to spend hours and hours formalizing this stuff, but he got that information, and he considered this information to be sacred. Sacred. He was asked in a particular seminar that he was giving to talk about this. And his answer to that was, well, you know, this is like talking about religion. What? So again, this is what makes Puharich kind of sketchy in a lot of ways. So he's talking to aliens who he thinks are semi-godlike. And why would an alien be godlike? I don't quite understand that. Doesn't make much sense to me, and I don't care what their capacities of doing things in the physical reality are. That doesn't make you godlike. It has to go way past that into high states of consciousness and doing things that make a lot of sense and that are in balance with the universe and help and prosper people they come in contact with. And I don't think that criteria meets most extraterrestrials' impact on people. So he mentioned that this was kind of like his religion, and that he considered these to be basically godlike beings. Why? Again, I just don't get that. They're extraterrestrials. What does that mean? I don't care whether they can come from planets, but they never show up. They always talk about showing up. They always buy their ticket. Oh, we got our ticket. We'll be there. And everything that came with that. So the whole idea is that the information that came from the Nine was never very interesting, profound, or did much of anything. And this is what you get from all these contacts, which make them very, very, like most channeling information, tends to be really poor. Really junky and really doesn't say anything. They like to talk profundities that mean nothing. Similar to the statement, things are more like today than they ever will be in the future. Are you impressed by that? That's a ridiculous double talk. So the whole idea is that people seem to be impressed by this, and this is one of the problems with Puharich. Puharich also spent a long time studying hallucinogens and other things, I think 5 or 6 years in some place in Mexico or South America or Central America. This is other things he studied. I don't know if they were mushrooms or whatever, I think it was. So he's done all this kind of stuff and really dedicated himself to it, and nothing came of it again. I think he wrote a book on that as well, but, you know, you can't make money if you don't keep writing books. But as I've mentioned, you can't get them published because he was blackballed by the military. It's very easy to do, and this happens all the time with me. These little cowards out there from different organizations are chatted in their ears, and of course, because I know what's going on, and they're more than happy to jump into the arms of evil people, particularly the international Nazis, which they're more than happy to be part of. But the whole idea is that, and this is the problem, he's not a good businessman, he doesn't know what he's doing here, and he's a little bit too easily impressed. You have to be very skeptical. You want to work with people, you like the people that you've got under hypnosis. He liked this doctor who talked to the Nine, he felt he was credible, and because he's credible, the information that he's giving to you is credible. Right? Now, this is the big mistake that people do that want to be liked and want to take care of their friends. Big, big mistake. So, people are people. I don't care whether they, are raising puppies and helping the poor. It doesn't mean that they aren't delusional morons. And they're my buddy. I know this guy. We've had dinner together. He's my godfather of my child. He lives down the block. He gave me a nice cigar. All the things that go into these. It doesn't add up to anything. And this is a trap that I watch very carefully. But it's very easy to get pulled into this. This guy knows something. I have a friend right now who really doesn't know with a lot of things going on, and he's quoting stuff that other people told him, and there's no proof that any of this stuff happened, and there's a lot of proof that it is not right, but falls into it because he thinks it's right, or maybe he even experienced things like that. It's just wrong. So it's easy to fall into those traps with everybody, because you want to give somebody credit. Well, I went to their seminars, I know them, I own their equipment. What does all that mean? Nothing. So where is the, yeah, but you want to be part of the club. You want to be liked. You want to think that it's happening because you went to the right seminars and you got the right equipment. No, it doesn't work like that. Now, a few people are going to say, well, I was taken. This is crap. And you want to test something for a period of time, and you want to be able to digest the information and look at it, look back after years and say, did this do anything? Few people will do that. It's too ego damaging to think that you spent a lot of money or spent years studying something and it was worthless. So Puharich certainly was a person who easily fell into this trap. He's my buddy. He's a good guy. I saw him save a baby. Whatever it is. So the whole idea is he's got to be right. So it has, the two twains do not meet. So we go ahead with Puharich here, and he's talking about this stuff. And again, he had quite a bit of money at different times. And as far as I understand, Uri Geller didn't see a dime of it. So I don't know how he expected to keep Uri Geller going, spending 6-7 hours a night with him after he came from shows and stuff. It's amazing that Uri Geller stayed around as long as he did. I certainly would not have. I said, if you don't get it after a week or so, baby, well, let's move on, because it ain't me, it's you. You're just stupid. And you don't want to pay me. So the whole idea was that Geller was smart, knowing that he would publish a book, and he was a well-known person, particularly at a time when these kind of people were highlighted in the United States, and knew this would be a launching pad for him, which I'm sure it was. I mean, this was a best-selling book. And millions of copies were sold. I don't think he saw a penny from it. I think Puharich put it all in his pocket, but again, I don't know. So with that, we get into other people. So Greta Woodrew, this fabulously wealthy woman with a super big business, was able to, who was into all this stuff and working with Puharich, apparently did absolutely nothing to help Puharich. Yet she had all this money and everything else, right down to the very end. Now, Puharich died, I think, 20 years earlier than Woodrew did. And let's get into the actual age of deaths as well. And this is one of the things that I look at now. People want to give Puharich that he was this great healer. And well, he wasn't a great healer. He was a researcher. He dealt with a lot of healers, which makes the situation even worse. One of them was Woodrew. The other one was Argos, the healer. Of course, he was killed. So many other psychics. And at the time of his death, he was living with a few psychics who were apparently healers, which is almost, not almost, is comical in a tragic type of way, because he was very sick. And died at the ripe old age of 71. Now, I go over this all the time, and the bottom line is that healers in general don't live very long. There's only a few that we can note, just like radionic practitioners. They all die young except one, Hieronymus. Most healers don't live all that long either. There's one, Parcells. She lived to be 106. But most healers don't. And this is because they're constantly taking in and out negative energies. And because of that, they're polluting themselves and they're breaking down their immune system. They're also playing with energies they shouldn't be, and they're not curing and empowering themselves. we have to wonder about that mystical 8 hertz, or even if Puharich himself had a device that worked like that, which a lot of people that are involved in stuff like this don't even have their own technologies, which is common. You're too busy selling it or developing it to even use it on yourself. So we have to really wonder what was going on there. So, but here we go again of people that have lots of money. Puharich had lots of money and didn't give a penny to Geller. And, of course, Greta Woodrew had potentially millions and millions of dollars. I don't think she thought a second about money her entire life. And certainly didn't help Puharich, particularly in his last days, who we have written confirmation from him in his lawsuits that he was living on Social Security at that time. I guess being over the age of 65. Which was 1,500. I don't know. I don't know if there's a number given or not. I kind of remember in my mind 1,100 a month, which wasn't much. But of course, back then it was a little more. But living off of the rentals company guy, as I've mentioned. And what it is that he was living with these people, and at the time of his death, he was very ill. Apparently, he had diabetes. He had several other conditions, including heart conditions. It has been claimed, I'm not sure his cause of death. I think there was some talk of that he was so sick from something that he kind of lost his muscle control and fell downstairs and was killed. But needless to say, he was very ill, apparently, at 71 and died. When your average life expectancy, really, even up to this day, to round the numbers off, basically, your average Joe is living to be 80, and your person who is basically has some decent medical care and lives a common, okay life is living to 85 to 90. We've got to remember, as I always say, Benjamin Franklin lived to be. But you remember him, people out there, the founder, one of the founding fathers of the United States, the great inventor. He lived to be 86, I believe. His parents lived to be 84. So the point that we're living longer is not. We're living about the same. And there's longer life expectancies, mostly because of antibiotics that save a lot of people's lives. So you get a bad infection, you get really sick, you pump down some antibiotics, and you live. Billions and billions of people have been saved by antibiotics. And let's make that fully and completely clear. So the bottom line is that, but apparently a lot of people have. Some of the pharaohs were living into their late 80s as well. We have some pretty good records there. And so many other people, if you look at them in history, check their age of how Daniel Boone lived to be 86, from what I understand. So these are all the things that we have to look at and say, well, are things that, no, they're not any better, and to a certain extent, a lot worse. And these are people that basically grew up on fairly poor food and poor water because you can't keep water well, which is why most of these people grew up on beer and alcohol, and why most people were drunk, because everybody couldn't store water, you stored beer. So the whole idea is this is the kind of reality that's out there. So needless to say, all this contact with extraterrestrials that Greta Woodrew had was through Andrija Puharich. And Puharich, of course, was talking about the 9 who never showed up. In his book on Uri Geller claimed to have contact with extraterrestrials yet again, and they were on their way. They lived forever. They put their consciousness in computers. Things that, of course, back in the 60s were pretty out there and not even thought of, was the information that came through. So, again, this group who was supposed to then land somewhere, and then I don't know why you'd possibly come to the planet Earth and want to intermix with people who are diseased, mentally ill, sexual deviants, people who enjoy and prosper from murder and war. Why would you do that? Why would anybody even say they were doing that? Doesn't make much sense again. And we get back into this is all channeled. Now, channeled, again, is the lowest level of the metaphysical ladder of life because it's so unprovable. And one of the problems of channeling is you never really ever get practical information. So you got to get real practical information. And of course, any people that have been in contact, as far as I know, from all the extraterrestrial literature that I've read, which is fairly extensive, not a single drop of practical information comes from any of these extraterrestrials. There's nothing there of how to do anything better, how to heal people, how to do this or that. And the big thing with Greta was the fact of using a particular leaf from a particular type of flowering bush, which the name escapes me. Why am I thinking rhododendrons? If that was it. And the fact is that she claimed that this was the big master healer. Yet these are everywhere, and thinking that you're going to take a leaf from a rhododendron plant and this is going to heal you is the height of absurdity. And she may have claimed to have done this, but there isn't any long lists of people that Greta Woodrew healed at all. None whatsoever that I'm aware of. There's one case talked about, and this is very typical of Greta, who only worked with the fashionable people, of some ballet dancer that she cured the knee of virtually instantly through basically what could be considered energy work and not necessarily anything coming from leaves or extraterrestrials. So she was able to balance the energy in this ballerina's knee, and she was able to dance again when she was told she never would. Now, that's the gossip. Is it true? I don't know. Can anybody confirm this? I don't know. And that's what we get from everybody. Yet when it really came down to it, Woodrew died at 80 years old. Not very good. She reached the common age that every Blow Joe reached, which is that age from basically, in this day and age, it's 77 to 80 is kind of the common life expectancy now because of some drug problems and COVID, etc., has brought the age down. But that really isn't very, very accurate. Most people are living to 80 without a problem, and most people who have any kind of care, especially if they're wealthy, like Woodrew, are living to be 85 to 90 without a problem. And we can see that even today. And a lot of people are even living close to be 100. Unfortunately, they tend to be in horrible physical shape. So when we look at that stuff, she certainly, as a magnificent healer with extraterrestrial connections that are supposed to be helping her, didn't live whatsoever. She didn't do much of anything. She didn't leave anything. She certainly didn't help the poverty-stricken Andrija Puharich, who was in desperate need of help and money and in desperate need of healing. So, it appears that from what I can read from his different books and things written on him, that he was deserted in his last years in his early 70s. Left under the umbrella of an old man in the Reynolds Aluminum Corporation, one of the founders, who was very wealthy but had one foot on a banana peel and the other one in the grave. So the whole idea is that that's what he was living under. Certainly not a good choice, but the only choice that he really had to deal with was that. So the bottom line is that he was abandoned by his family. Apparently didn't want to work with him. They were upset with him. He was a social outcast to a certain degree. I believe people were gotten to that were funding him to some degree, even beyond Reynolds, stating that he was immoral because he had a girl living with him there. That was his, quote, girlfriend living with him at the actual institute that was that he was living at and allowed to live there, which was his main house as well as his research laboratory. They jumped on him because of that, which is almost comical in this day and age. And apparently his children and everything else kind of deserted him. Nobody liked him because he wasn't at home watching Gilligan's Island drinking Pepsi. And I'm sure he wasn't the greatest of dads because people who are busy and have something that is more important than watching Gilligan's Island generally are not that concentrative on family. Now, I don't know if he was a good provider or whatever else happened. It looks like he didn't have much money. But most people said that, or at least his ex-wives felt like that he was a good dude and in general, but because of his lack of basically being there, they divorced him. So, and certainly his Dutch ex-wife has basically good things to say about him as a man, except that he was gone. So, brings a lot of interesting little stories in there, and you can get that book online wherever you can look it up. And get her side of the story of what's going on if that finds something interesting. But here we go again. We have a very rich person who did not assist Puharich, who everybody thinks was a good guy and was so nice, not nice enough to donate money for his survival, particularly by somebody who was rolling in dough. And of course, his children didn't really save anything of his, didn't do anything, are still not doing it. It's amazing how stupid the children are. Of course, Greta's children have got her 2 books, possibly 3, but her 2 main books about extraterrestrials are certainly being published now. There doesn't seem to be any connection for any kind of newsletters of 10, 20 years of newsletters. Certainly it'd be interesting to see what she was saying during this period of time while she was waiting for the extraterrestrials to arrive. It's like waiting at the airport and never, ever, the plane don't show up. So all of that sucks. All of that is horrible. And all of that is so typical of this industry where nobody is assisting each other. And here's a case where someone intimately knew Puharich, and I mean working close together, and ignored what he was doing in later life while she went on egoizing her entire reality. Listening to Woodrew on the talk show with Bill Jenkins, the precursor to these types of shows, a talk show in Los Angeles that he had that for 10 or 15 years that had everybody on it, she came off as a very arrogant, stuck-up, rich girl. And certainly it was all about her and what she was doing, and certainly she had no information to give. She was telling people in a scare tactics. There was a lot of survival, stopping up on food, do this, do that. A lot of stuff, again, preaching the things that get people, hot and bothered. Makes me horny, man. Oh, the earth's going to end. Oh, baby. Oh, we're all going to die. Ooh. So you hear this all the time, people that preach doom and gloom that never, ever happens. Life is about going into strong decay, as we're going through right now. And these are very observable. But there generally is not something radically happens where there's doom or gloom. She was preaching that and telling people to stock up on it. She was a prepper before prepper was popular. But I'll tell you, prepping has been popular since the 70s. And I was into it to a certain extent. I used to go to stores in North Hollywood, California, that was specialized in this. And they had all that kind of stuff. The survivalists, they called them. Have you forgot that? I think there was even a movie out there with the survivalist that was done by, was Robin Williams in that? Chevy Chase? I don't know. But they were 2 comics and it was a dark comedy called The Survivalist. Things that get forgot. So I used to go to that store and found a lot of interesting stuff. They used to have a lot of wild magazines and had all these wild books, and they had cool T-shirts, and I bought some of this stuff myself. So I remember their CIA T-shirts. So this is when it was the government was good and we're trying to save things. That turned into the government was bad. Now we're back to all, of course, the weak-kneed, cowardice, bend-over Christians who want to lick the bottom of the government as they do, supporting that stuff. And this started with Ronnie Reagan, the guy who never went to church. And it believes in astrology, mommy. So the whole idea is that these are all the things that were happening at that particular time. So here we go again of a community that here is one of the, what we should be called the treasured masters. These people who are the founders of the industry, the pioneers of all this stuff, who did some pretty interesting work studying, which was popular at that time, hallucinogens in Mexico, where he spent, I believe, 4 years taking the ayahuasca. I don't know if it was ayahuasca or I think it was mushrooms, but I'm not sure. And, of course, from there, he went into Huna land and studied Huna and was initiated there. I believe he was initiated into the mushroom factory in Mexico as well. But he was initiated into the Huna religion by a master Hunaist, a kahuna, which is a priest of Huna. So the whole idea is that, so it has been explained to me recently. Yes, that's the correct way, because a lot of people say kahuna. But kahuna isn't the religion. Huna is the religion. And there's been many amazing things stated about the kahunas of the Huna religion. But, of course, we don't have any pictures or anything else. Same old story. Lots of information. I think by Williamson, who wrote a bunch about them. And, of course, I don't know what Puharich did about that. I'm not familiar with any books he's written on his experiences at that time. But he did spend 4 years there, and 4 years seems to be his limit in most things, and certainly is enough time to learn something well. After that, there isn't all that much to learn. There's an awful lot to practice, but not much to learn. So when we get involved in all that, we run into these particular areas of problematic situations to go with it. So apparently, my impression of Greta was the fact that she was a very egotistical, stuck-up woman who certainly didn't help anybody else. It was all about her and her alien contact. She liked to sit around with the rich people, sipping brandy and drinking tea and talking about, I'm rich. I can't be crazy. So, and apparently a lot of people bought into that. Or maybe they just wanted her services, whatever she was offering, and felt that they would put up with her kind of nonsense, channeled, unverifiable, unprovable nonsense, which you get with all channeling. All channeling is virtually worthless and doesn't seem to be based in anything that can be provable. This is double, triple, and quadruple proof when it comes to anything with extraterrestrials. So let's get real there as well. So all the extraterrestrial things have never gone. Whether it is Billy Myers, who talks just diarrhea of the mouth, who has goofy pictures that mean nothing, to Greta Woodrew, who produced absolutely nothing, was a great healer. Well, where are all the people she healed? Where's her book on healing? Where are the techniques? Nothing is there. She left her money to animals and gave money by the, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, to ecological organizations, which certainly is all warranted of praise, but she certainly didn't seem to help anybody but her own little star institution, which produced absolutely nothing. Certainly didn't go out there and help anybody heal, and I don't know what the bigger story is there other than her healing some ballet dancer. Next thing would be opera singers who had a bad throat. So the whole idea is that this is what came from that, and there's absolutely nothing there. Puharich and the 9, well, he wasn't helped anybody, dying horribly sick at 71 with no money. Uri Geller certainly has done very well for himself, certainly can prove his empowerment, but has stepped back from that because it's no longer popular. Now, whether it was ever true, we don't know. You're a showman. If you expect to go out there and talk honesty and not give a Hollywood spin to something, well, you can end up with plain and simple, no money. And Geller's been smart enough to, even in later years, because he has no support from the metaphysical community, none of them, that he has hooked up his trailer to the magicians who are extremely wealthy, plain and simple. So, and continues to combine magic, regular theatrical magic, with psychic practices. This is all part of the game and certainly understandable and justifiable. So if Penn and Teller, the clown college graduate who never graduated high school, by the way, Penn Jillette, has made his worth now $150 million, and his little silent goofball high school teacher buddy is worth $150 million. Well, I think Geller deserves some of that money too. And if it has to be made up in a few little tricks in with some other things, well, more power to him. It's show business. You want to sit there and look at somebody bend spoons for 2 hours and pay $500 for that, like you have to do for Penn Jillette. But if you're lucky, he'll take you over to his dungeon later. Or you can go eat some peanut butter where he puts on cheese or boxes of Krispy Kremes. The smart intellectual he was. Just ate crap like that until he was 350 pounds. So the whole idea is that, and then figured out that he has to go on a diet, and that means, well, I'm going to make a lot more money in another business called diet books. Ooh, Penn, typical. So with that, we will end on part 2 here. I'm going to pick up and come to a conclusion on part 3.